I know what you're thinking. That's a pretty badass looking truck. I agree. But I know what you're also thinking. For $75,000, it damn well better be. And you know what? Point taken. But when it comes to luxury or prestigious items, they're never a value proposition. So all we're here to do today is to find out, is the all-new Tundra TRD Pro as special as it looks? And we're gonna do that by taking a look outside. Inside, I'm gonna show you some of the features. We're gonna throw a bike in the back in our patented bike tests, which should be fun in a truck. And then last but not least, we're gonna take it out on the road to see what it's like to drive. Starting with the exterior, whether you like the styling or not, it's hard to argue against the overall presence this vehicle has. It is not only massive, but it's very bold and very muscular. Starting first with the lighting in the front, you get the 3 lights on the grille, you get the light bar as well for the TRD Pro version. You also get these little accents on the black plastic. It has an interesting texture to it, all the way back to the tailgate, which has massive letters of TRD Pro written in it. It's something that demands your attention whether you like it or not. And you're also seeing it here in a 2024 exclusive color called Terra, which is a copper or sort of burnt orange color. I think looks absolutely fantastic. It stands out from the rest of vehicles without being too loud like that super bright orange that they also offer this truck in. This latest generation Tundra is all new, but there's no bigger change than this engine. Gone is the naturally aspirated V8 engine in the previous model that was known to go for a bajillion miles, and in its place is a very technologically advanced 3.5 liter twin turbo hybrid V6 engine. Now, we don't know whether or not these things are going to be reliable. They're simply too new, but what we do know is that they make fantastic power. 437 horsepower and 583 pound-feet of torque. Absolutely huge torque numbers. And it's really interesting how it's designed with this hybrid powertrain. It's not like a Prius. It actually has a motor generator sandwiched in between the engine and transmission, which gives it a little bit of boost in between these turbos coming on. It makes for a quite interesting driving experience, as you guys are gonna find out. Last thing to note is the fuel economy, 18 miles to the gallon city, 20 miles to the gallon highway. You can mostly thank these giant wheels and tires for that relatively low number. How can you talk TRD Pro without talking suspension, wheels, and tires? Well, starting first with these tires, these are Falcon Wild Peaks in a 33-inch overall diameter, 285, 65, 18-inch tires, and they're wrapped, of course, on these TRD Pro specific wheels. Blacked out, let's be honest, they look fantastic. And then behind there you get the beefed up suspension components in red, of course, that you get with the TRD Pro. Couple that with some Fox shocks, an electronic locking differential, some skid plates. This thing is incredibly off-road capable. Hopping into the interior, and this is a quantum leap compared to the last generation Tundra. Now, in fairness, that car was ancient, so really this is Toyota catching up with its competitors rather than doing something groundbreaking. But all that to say that this is still a super nice interior, and once again, now competitive in the space. What works and what doesn't? Well, the design itself is really cool. I really like how they've integrated Toyota into the dash. It looks very modern, and everything in here is very usable. You don't have to rely on the screen all that much. You can do most of your day-to-day tasks without it, like the switch gear here for the HVAC controls, your heated and cooled seats is all physical, and you don't need to interact with the screen to do that, which is nice. Also worth noting that these features like the heated seats here, heated steering wheel, persist through key cycles, meaning that when you turn the car off, when you turn it back on, it will go back to the previous setting that you were using. So that's really nice here in this Colorado winter where it's going to be cold for a while. I always want the heated seats on. I always want the heated steering wheel on. So those continue to work. What else is good about the interior? Well, I like this all digital gauge cluster. It has a ton of different gauges and little options on it, which I really like to look at. The boost, you know, how much PSI it's making, how much of the battery is being used. If you're kind of a nerd, you'll like that stuff. This screen is giant, and a giant screen alone is not necessarily something that improves a car. You do get a really great view of all the maps and everything on there, but what I will say is that it is so big that you really have to kind of reach all the way across for some of the settings that end up over here on the right. A little bit of a nitpick. I'm not going to be too upset about that, because overall it's fast and it uses Apple CarPlay. Really, my only complaint on this interior, outside of these seats being just okay, at least for my build, they're kind of just like a regular basic bench. But the storage isn't great here. In the door cards, they're pretty small as far as like what it's going to fit in terms of your kind of water bottle size. There's a little bit of storage here in the center console, and I will say in fairness that this armrest does have some unique storage options, but overall I think they could have done a little bit better job, especially in the door cards, making room for more of your stuff. Now the back seats are absolutely huge. I'm 6'1" and can sit behind myself and just swimming in room back there. And you would, of course, expect that out of a giant truck like this. But with all that said, let's head to the back of the bed, where we will throw the bike on the back and see how that fits back there.
Get ready for the world's fastest bike test. No surprise here, but the truck bed has plenty of space. I threw my bike on the tailgate for the cool factor, but you can also fit it with the bike flat and tailgate up. It is worth noting the TRD Pro only comes in a 5.5-foot bed. That's pretty small in terms of a full-size truck, but fairly standard for the off-road focused ones. If you enjoyed the bike test and the video, hit the subscribe button and leave a comment below so you don't miss future content.
Time to take the new Tundra TRD Pro for a drive. We're going to start with a little bit of a dirt road. Certainly not going to call this off-roading, but we have to start at least on a little bit of dirt, given that we are in the off-road package of the Tundra TRD Pro. But the first thing that I've noticed while I'm off-road here is this center console rattling like crazy. How can you make an off-road vehicle that has a rattly center console? Everything else is solid. I hear no noises, but this sort of like modular design center console thing is rattling. I hate to start off on a bad note, but that's a little bit frustrating in an off-road vehicle. Now, let's talk about some of the good. This suspension is, of course, a lot of the reason that you're buying the TRD Pro. And it does do a great job of soaking up bumps here off-road. I mean, this platform is built on the new Toyota Land Cruiser platform. So it's a Japanese platform that they sort of adapted to put the Tundra platform on for the Americans. And it does ride significantly better than the previous model. Now, in that sense, it rides a little more like an SUV than it does a truck, but you're still not getting away from the truckness of it. It still has a live axle. While they have gone away from leaf springs, and this now has a multi-link rear end, and it's way better for it, you still can't get away from the fact that this is a giant truck, and it is a little busy at times on certain sorts of pavement. It just feels like a body-on-frame truck. Now, significantly improved than previous, but very nice that the towing capacity is still very much up in this thing. 11,000 pounds for your off-road focused TRD version. That's pretty impressive. I think the Raptor only does about 8 or 9 or something like that. So the suspension, of course, is the big thing with this car or truck. And of course, the reason I bring that up is because how many people are actually going to off-road this thing? Probably 1% of buyers, outside of just what I did, just going on a dirt road briefly. These trucks are so big, so when you want to take them on an off-road trail, it's often kind of difficult, but it's certainly capable. Let's keep in mind that the standard Tundra is going to be very capable off-road with, you know, four-wheel drive. Now this has a locker, which is nice, but it's worth noting that you can only engage the locker in 4-low. So you can't engage it in two-wheel drive mode, you can't engage it in 4-high either. So that's kind of interesting. But let's talk about the best part of this truck, and that is the powertrain and drivetrain. All right, so this iForce Max engine has been the biggest surprise for me. It makes crazy torque. And it's really a combination of course, a great engine, but also the hybridization of this thing. And I can't believe I'm saying that. We've traditionally always thought that hybrid is a bad thing in the car guy world, but you can really augment some power with a little electric motor and not totally ruin the experience. What's there to say about this engine? Well, first and foremost, everyone loved that V8 engine that they used to have, and it made a good noise, you know, it had a lot of character. And I think that's what a lot of people are worried about losing with this engine. Now, it obviously doesn't make a V8 noise, but what I will say is that it has this like rumble and throbbiness to it. Let's see if you guys can hear it here on this stretch. It actually sounds really good. It's by no means a V8, but it has character to it. And I tell you what, it makes way more power and torque than that V8 did. So it's hard to argue with their move to a turbocharged engine. Now, reliability and all of those things, that's a whole nother equation, which is, you know, tough to say today because we just don't know, is this going to be a reliable engine? They have had some turbocharger issues already, I believe, with the wastegate. So that's not great. And obviously it's a lot more complex long term. So statistically speaking, there's more to go wrong. But, you know, Toyota claims that they, you know, really commercial grade test their vehicles. So time will tell on that. But what I'll say is that, once again, the power is fantastic and the fuel economy is actually decent considering that this is the off-road package vehicle. The Raptor gets 3 or 4 miles to the gallon worse than this thing does. So you have that to thank for this, you know, with the turbocharged engine and efficiency. Outside of the engine, the transmission is actually another high point of this vehicle. While we're talking about the F-150, the Raptor, though the F-150 is a fantastic product. I mean, Ford has so many dollars to put towards their F-150 program because they sell a bajillion, right? So it's hard to argue against that product overall, but what I will say is the thing that I dislike most about the Ford products is their 10-speed transmission. It's just not tuned that well, and it's a little bit clunky at times, and this doesn't have any of that. This is super smooth, it's tuned fantastic, it gets in the gear that you want quickly. So I think this 10-speed is a highlight. And then we talked briefly about it before, but this electric motor generator that is in between the engine transmission really does a cool job of filling in some torque when the turbos are coming on boost. And you can see that in the gauge cluster here. It has the max gauge where it's showing you how much electric energy it's using to drive that electric motor. But it kind of does like fill in the gaps for you. And I could see it coming when you're just kind of like partial throttle, the turbos aren't spooled up, it kicks in and it moves you really well. I'm in sport mode, so it's kind of in full kill mode right now, wanting to give me all the power it can. But that hybridness is really cool. And it's a relatively simple hybrid system, once again, being that it's sandwiched in between the engine and transmission. not like the kind of Prius technology, but it can completely decouple from that electric motor and have just the engine drive, et cetera, et cetera. It can also strictly drive the car itself, the electric motor, up to about 18, 19 miles an hour. So when you're just kind of moving around, putting around, that's nice. I think it's a great use of technology, and it doesn't get in the way in any way. I mean, obviously you have a battery pack in the back here, but nickel metal hydride pack, can't talk today, that is not terribly big. They're also known for being a lot cheaper than lithium ion packs, and it's very accessible. It's actually right under this back seat. So what else can we talk about with this? I will say that the one thing I don't like in terms of driving dynamics, it handles really well. The steering is pretty good. It doesn't have a great turning circle or turning radius, but what off-road truck does. But it does have this weird, I let off the brake. I'm on the brake at this corner. I let off the brake, but it doesn't let off right away. And I've noticed this with some vehicles recently. Some are more egregious than others, but man, this one really hangs onto the brake longer than it feels like it should. And I suspect that's probably something to do with the electric motor generator still holding on to the brake and recharging some of that electricity, and also probably not wanting to upset the vehicle. You know, if you let off from hard braking and you let off suddenly, it can kind of upset the vehicle if you're not a really great driver. So that's a little bit weird. I don't love that dynamically, but none of these things that I've mentioned as like small downsides are deal breakers by any means. This is an overall great truck. And the last thing that I'll say is, we have to compare this to things like the Raptor and the ZR2, just because it is in a similar price range. This is a cheaper vehicle for sure. It's about $6,000 to $7,000 cheaper than a Raptor, and it's not as hardcore as those. So the Raptor definitely has a better suspension, the one I drove. Not like significantly, but definitely noticeably better. The ZR2 as well, with those DSSV shocks, those spool valve shocks. I mean, those shocks you can't touch. So those tend to just have like a slightly better ride. But this is the slightly pared down version, really, right? Because it's a little bit cheaper and it's a little more on-road focused. So I think it sort of answers the question of, what do you need a truck for? What are you going to use it for? How much off-roading are you actually going to do? I mean, this only has 33-inch tires. You can get the Raptor in up to 37s, so that kind of just shows you how much more off-road focused those are. But if you're going to predominantly be driving on the street, this is a really compelling package. I mean, it gets better fuel economy than the Raptor. Like I said, it's not as off-road capable. And I think most important with a product like this, it's the fact that this has an it factor. Just like right away when you're around it, when you get in it, when you drive it, you just kind of feel like a boss. I don't know what other word to say other than that. It just has this like kind of elitist mentality to it. And that is, of course, the fact that it is, unnecessary. Let's be honest. All of these trucks are unnecessary. There's no other word for it. But in a sense, if you're going to spend the money, that's kind of what you want, right? You kind of want this special character. And between the engine sound, the fact that it's really quite fast, I like this interior a lot, minus some rattles off-road. But it's a really compelling package, and if you're somebody who likes Toyotas, you're really going to like this product, because Toyota has really elevated their game. They've stepped up, and they're very much playing on par, very close to on par with the big boys, the F-150s, the Silverados. So if you're a Toyota-specific person, you can finally be like, yes, I'm not just, you know, saying, well, I bought a Toyota because it has a super reliable engine that will never break. Now you could say it's nice inside, it rides really good, it looks cool, it's actually pretty fast. So there's some cars that every now and then I don't want to give back, and this is one of them. I've really, really, really enjoyed, you know, driving around in this thing. And if you have disposable income, $75,000 is no small amount of money. But if you have disposable income, I think you'd really like it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think in the comments below of the video and the Toyota Tundra in general. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.